welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 23. We're starting out this time with Landslide. 1 red mana sorcery. Sacrifice any number of mountains. Landslide deals that much damage to target player or planeswalker. This is a pretty easy way to close out the game in a sort of desperate situation. I mean, later in a Commander game, you got like 7 mountains or 8 mountains in play. 1 mana, sacrifice them all to finish off an opponent. Obviously, it's also going to work extra good in that sacrifice lands theme where you are wanting to do that anyway. It is only sacrificing mountains, but if I'm doing a red-white sacrifice lands deck and I'm going to be doing a second sunrise thing anyway, why not throw 6 or 7 damage to my opponent's face before I get them back? In a very similar theme, Last Ditch Effort. 1 red mana instant, sacrifice any number of creatures. Last Ditch Effort deals that much damage to any target, so here you can kill creatures as well, but likely I think you'll probably want to throw this at your opponent's face as sort of a closing out the game scenario, because of course you're just going to sacrifice all your creatures to finish your opponent off, right? I mean, heck, if you have both of these in your mono-red goblin deck, you can do quite a bit of damage to close the game out for only 2 red mana, right? All right, coming in at number 3, Lapse of Certainty. And funny enough, I have a couple of bizarre off-color counter spells in this episode, and Lapse of Certainty is one of my personal favorites. 2 and a white instant counter target spell. That's right, this is just a hard counter spell in white. However, if that spell is countered this way, put it on top owner's library instead of into that player's graveyard, which will likely mean they'll just draw it again on their next turn. But that can be an absolute blow in a lot of situations, right, guys? Just think about it. Someone cast a board wipe because you're going to win the game on your turn with your giant board, and you just counter that farewell and put it on top of their library. You don't care if they're going to draw it again because you're just going to kill them on your turn, right? Lots of big game-winning spells that you can save the day with this, and the fact that they're drawing it again on the following turn isn't going to make a big difference. But of course, the best way to use a card like this is against other counter spells, right? So now I'm casting a farewell or some big splashy spell that I don't want to get countered, and my opponent is going to counter it with their typical blue counter spell. I can now counter their counter spell, and the fact that they're drawing it next turn, I don't care. I'm getting to resolve the thing that I want to do in the moment, right? That's where this card is particularly good. I love this card. I have it in a couple of decks. You also get that really neat gotcha moment with the white counter spell. Coming in at number 4, Latnam's Legacy. 1 and a blue instant. Shuffle a card from your hand into your library. If you do, draw 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So this card is very unassuming, but I think it is doing a couple of things really well. First of all, it's putting a card back into your library, which a lot of decks might be looking for. If you have a deck or a commander that is either like revealing cards off of the top of your library till you hit a certain thing, or searching your library for a certain thing and putting it directly into play, that sort of scenario doesn't work great if that card is in your hand. If you're doing, say, a polymorph sort of deck where I'm going to destroy my creature and then reveal cards off the top until I get a really big scary creature, well, if that creature's in your hand, it's not going to work very well. With Latnam's Legacy, now I can shuffle it into my library and put it where I want it to be. I also really like this card. It's sort of like a secret tech situation against wheel decks because, of course, wheels make you wheel away your hand, which is maybe the most frustrating part about them, and it allows you to save a card that you don't want to have to be discarding. If you have no way to get stuff back out of your graveyard and you have that really important card in your hand, now in response to a wheel, I can shuffle it into my library. And the added bonus here is, of course, I'm going to draw 7 cards, but I'm going to draw the extra 2 cards from my Latnam's Legacy on the next turn's upkeep. So that's an added 2 cards that I'm going to have more than anyone else. That's why this card I think is extra good against a wheel deck. But worst case scenario with this card is it's essentially a Thrill of Possibility, right? I mean, I know it's blue, so you're going to have lots of great options in blue, but worst case scenario, it's a Thrill of Possibility. You're getting rid of a card in your hand and you're adding 2 more cards. You got to wait a turn to get them, but essentially you're getting the exact same value, and Thrill of Possibility isn't like a zillion commander decks. Latnam's Legacy, worst case scenario, is that card. Next up, really interesting card here, Liability, 1 black, black enchantment. Whenever a non-token permanent is put into a player's graveyard from the battlefield, that player loses 1 life. This is going to speed up the game pretty quick, am I right? Now, it is non-token, so it's not working against treasure tokens. It's not working against, any other kind of creature token or anything like that. But everything else, the opponent cracks a fetch land, they're going to be losing a life. This works against a lot of stuff, but of course it works against you as well. It would be really easy to shoehorn this into any commander deck if it didn't work on you, of course. A lot of themes where this might fit, though. I think if you're just removing your opponent's stuff a lot, you're just destroying your opponent's stuff, whether it be their artifacts, their enchantments, their creatures, or even their lands, this will be giving them an extra hit, but probably the best place for a card like this is, of course, in that group slug situation. This is exactly what you want in a deck like that, where everyone's just getting hit by this all the time, because decks like that love effects like this. Next up, a card that I have mentioned on my series before and not that long ago, in fact, very underrated in the format in my opinion. Light from Within, 2 white, white enchantment, and has the not often seen Chroma ability, which of course, as I read it, will seem very familiar. Each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each white mana symbol in its mana cost. So of course, it is exactly the same as Devotion. Chroma is sort of the original Devotion. This is just a great anthem effect, I think. Obviously, if a creature of yours only has 1 white mana symbol, then it's only going to get a +1/+1, but 2 pips means +2, 3 pips mean +3. Things can get a hand really fast here. Extra good, I think, in a mono white deck, and also extra good if you have a commander with a lot of white pips, because of course it's going to get an extra good bump off of this thing. Coming in at number 7, one of my favorite tutors in the format, Long-Term Plans. 2 and a blue instant, search your library for a card, then shuffle, and put that card third from the top. And yes, this is an unconditional tutor in blue. A lot of people probably don't know that blue has, and in fact it has probably a couple unconditional tutors that I will end up mentioning on this series. This is one of them. Of course, you got to wait a couple turns. If you're just drawing lots of cards though, you're going to get it right away, right? You think about it this way, this is an instant, you cast it on your opponent's end step, that card's going to go third from the top. On your turn, you're going to untap and draw. Now it's already 2 from the top. So now all you have to do is cast a divination or something, and you've got that card now in your hand. Or even better, you can just do any scrying effect or Sensei's Divining Top effect to immediately put that card to the top of your library or put it into your hand, right? It's not that hard to dig 3 deep into your library and get that card right away. So in a lot of situations, this is actually just 3 mana instant speed Demonic Tutor, which of course is pretty fantastic. I'm actually shocked this card didn't see more play in the format. Coming in at number 8, another card I'm kind of shocked it doesn't see more play in the format is Magerite Stone. This is one that has been played in the format for a long, long time, but it probably should see a lot more play because, of course, it goes in so many decks. So 2 mana artifact, pay 1 and tap, untap, target creature that has an activation ability with a tap in its cost. So, of course, this can untap any creature that has a tap ability, which, of course, you want to put it in a deck where your commander has a tap ability. How many commanders have a tap ability, you ask? Well, let me quickly look it up. It's over 300. There are over 300 commanders with a tap ability that you might want to be untapping so that you can use it again, which leads me to believe, because this is a colorless card, that it is not in nearly as many decks as it probably could be, right? So not a lot of deciphering that needs to be done here. If you got a deck with a commander that has a tap ability, you should probably give this consideration. All right, here's kind of a weirder one. Magistrate's Veto, 2 and a red enchantment. White creatures and blue creatures can't block. That's it. Just white creatures and blue creatures are not able to block. And of course, you're not going to put this in your Boros deck, and you're not going to put this in your Izzet deck because it works on you as well, but seems pretty good in your Rakdos deck or your Gruul deck or even your mono red Goblins deck again. And I had a guy on the last video say, man, you don't recommend a lot of red cards on this series. I'm recommending a bunch here. And this is one that, again, it's not like going to blow anyone away, but it's just a funny fit in a deck that's probably more in the aggro-y theme. The Goblin theme seems like a good one. Just anyone who's playing white or blue creatures aren't going to be able to block my creatures. That seems pretty good. All right, and we're going to end off with another red card. That's right, I got a bunch of red cards in this one, and this is another funny one, another off-color counterspell, Mage's Contest. 1 red instant, you and target spell's controller bid life. You start the bidding with a bid of 1. In turn order, each player may top the high bid. The bidding ends when the high bid stands. The high bidder loses life equal to the high bid. If you win the bidding, counter that spell. Oh, that's a whole lot of words. Let me make it a little bit easier for you guys. This is a counter spell, right? And essentially what can happen is the spell you're countering will still resolve if the person casting that spell decides to pay more life than you're paying, right? It just comes down to how badly do they want it. So of course, for that reason, this can actually be used for a couple of different scenarios. It's funny because I have seen this card in action before where someone is countering someone's commander, not because they actually want to counter their commander, but just because they want them to pay a bunch of life, right? So someone casts their commander, I cast this, I'm going to counter the spell unless they bid more life than me. So I'm going to start at 1, they're going to pay 2, I'm going to pay, let's say 10. I'll just jump right there. I'm going to pay 10 life. Are you going to pay more than 10 life to counter your commander? Of course they will. They want their commander. I don't really care that they're going to have their commander. I paid 3 mana essentially to do them 11 damage. That's where you can really get to the upside with this. But also the added upside is maybe I really don't want them to have that card. And as long as I have more life than them, I'm guaranteed winning, right? They can't bid more life than they have. So if they got 20 life and I got 40 life, this is just a hard counter spell. I mean, I'm probably going to have to pay a bunch of life, but it's still a hard counter spell and even better later in the game. I mean, I know a lot of people think this is a goofy card that's actually pretty bad, but think about it later in the game, guys. On turn 8 or 9 or 10, when everyone's life is pretty low, this gets real good because, of course, nobody's going to be wanting to pay that life for this card, right? So this kind of becomes a hard counterspell once your opponent's life get really, really low. I think it's an interesting include and a lot of decks. That is it for today, though. 10 more cards that I think you guys should give consideration for in your commander decks. That is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.